I loved your comments, Sarah, about diversity and about how difficult it is to be sourcing and about how conscious you have to be to get the kind of people that you want and the diversity of opinions and how it makes for a totally different experience when you do that. So I'm going to be talking about 3 different conferences, the Summit, TED, and the Future of Storytelling, and talking about I think that we were all craving to be together, and there's lots of reasons that we've touched on that tonight, which is that it's a new form of media to look out into an audience and see people. We spend so much of our time disconnected and disembodied from those around us, and it's great to be able to come out and touch and feel and experience the kind of serendipity that does not happen when you're interacting necessarily with your screen. So the 3 things that I think are were in the 3 consonants. So context and content and community. I think that the themes that access and create cultural zeitgeist, which is the context, the content, particularly when you have generous speakers, which I'm always a huge fan of. I think it makes the participant-speaker situation dynamic very different and wonderful. And then the community, which is this connection to peers we've been talking about. So in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm on the TED Brain Trust. I'm a founding member of Summit, and I'm on the advisory council of Future of Storytelling. So just so you know where I come from. TED is, I've got a long history with it. I first began my love affair in 1992 with it, and through the years, it's really been one of the most important influences in my life. It started, I know Jane mentioned, it started with Richard Saul Wurman, and it was the dinner party that we all wanted to go to. We all imagined someday that we could be a part of. And then it grew to 600 people, and then 900 people, and then when Chris Anderson bought it, it turned into 1,600 people, and then the talks went up online. And that started as an experiment, and taking that conference and the ideas that were worth spreading way beyond the confines of a conference. And in the process, it really transformed the whole conference and media landscape. We touched on that a little bit tonight, and forever now there in excess of 1 billion talks have been viewed online, so it makes it one of the most powerful media companies in the world. So one would say, if you can see everything online, why would you spend at least $8,500 and a full week of your time to attend a conference like TED? And I would argue, for me, there's every reason why I would do that. I think it's a cultural summit of the highest level. It feels purposeful. It's a big time and a money commitment for everyone involved, and people feel like when they make that investment, they have to bring their best self for the week, and they have to engage in a way that that leaves a lot of their sort of business as usual behind. They also trust at this point. They trust that it's going to be worth their time and their investment. It's interesting from a global perspective. Where else will you launch a global idea? So last week, or a little over a week ago, when Monica Lewinsky decided that she was going to come out of hiding after 17 years, she did a very artful talk on public shaming. The talk happened the morning of the 19th of March, and the New York Times story broke on the, March 19th, so that same day. But instead of the Times breaking the story that Monica's back, it was breaking the story that TED broke the story that Monica's back. So this idea that a conference could be making news, I think, is something quite interesting. And I think that sort of when you move, a conference becomes a form of media, and in this case, a launch pad for many ideas over people, or as we've talked about a bit before. So this takes an extraordinary sensitivity, I think, to the cultural zeitgeist, which is what's a story, when's the right time to do this. I know that there was a lot of behind-the-scene planning and a great deal of work and a huge amount of preparation that goes on to making these speakers, their ideas come forth in a way that can capture the imagination of a global audience. And speaking of zeitgeist, there's this developing of a unique connection between a speaker and an audience. So this is a woman that I would argue that nobody had ever heard of, except for her academic research, narrow academic research in Texas. She did a talk about vulnerability. Now, several years ago, you wouldn't have thought that that was necessarily part of the cultural zeitgeist, and it struck a chord to the tune of 19 million views thus far and translated into 50 different languages. and her talk is a speaker. It's so full of humility, and the audience is really completely full of empathy. And I think that's another thing that happens at TED. It does happen in other places too, but this way of how you can create a sense of empathy of the audience, bringing them their selves. Whenever somebody messes up on stage, people will be clapping, and you think, it's so supportive. You're kind of with the speaker in every way, and I think the speakers really feel that because, God, they're so nervous. It's. And speaking of this sort of insight into the speaker's world, it's really intellectual performance art at its best. This is Jill Bolte Taylor, who pulled out of a kind of a plastic Tupperware container a human brain when she went in to talk about what it was like to experience a stroke and go through the movement from the left to the right side of her brain. One of the things that I think TED does very well, and leading the way, and a number of conferences have followed, is to make sure that they've got the newest, most interesting ideas that their speakers are working on. So you won't go there and hear something that you've known about for years, or that it's sort of a retread of the same talk over and over again. So the speakers are excited about it. They're nervous about it. There's this great tension between the audience and the speakers because they're handing up the new baby. There's a sense of birth that happens there. And then there's the community. So the sense of people being able to be interchangeable from the audience and on the stage, and that this year at TED, I had on one side of me, I had Bill and Melinda Gates were there for a minute, and Larry Page and his wife, and Scott Cook and his wife, and they were all around, and it wasn't it was just in some ways it's business as usual. So when we talk about who's there, it is extremely elite, much in the way that Davos is, although the vibe is very different. So this sense of division or lack of division, I think it's very interesting. So aside from the prep time and the nervousness before people go up on stage, and then the 17 up to 18 minutes that they're on stage, most of the speakers are there they're at the conference for the rest of the week. So you can engage with them. So you do have access, and that's very important in terms of developing a community. So I think at its heart, it's really a deeply human experience. And I think that's something that we're all craving. One more piece on the platform, the TEDx has been something that's quite exceptional, because it was this balance between the exceptionally elite and the democratization and the spread of important ideas. And yes, TED is extremely exclusive in terms of the attendance of it, but that's juxtaposed with the vast availability and pervasiveness of all of the outlets and the distribution for TED. So the TEDx was this experiment in radical openness where people could, individuals from the community could go wherever they lived, and they could organize conferences. And people would say, oh my God, how could you dilute the brand like this? And what will happen? You just open it up, and what happens with quality control? And they opened it up, and what happened was astonishing. So they've had 12,000 events to date, and that's been about 6 years. There have been over 3,000 events per year that happen, so that's roughly 10 a day around the world, 170 countries, 2,300 cities, including the TEDx and the space station, 50,000 talks in the archives, 15,000 new talks each year, viewed last year 300 million times, 750 million times to date. That's a TEDx, which is separate from the TED.com talks. So over 3,000 organizers in a community mobilized into all kinds of things, not just ideas worth spreading, but potentially actions worth spreading. So the TED Prize is another thing that has grown out of this community and is being fed by the community. It's as evidenced by the slide here. This is David Isay, who is of StoryCorps. He won the prize this year. His wish is to create an app which has been created you could download so anybody could tell their story and upload it, and will go into the Library of Congress where they're trying to amass this incredible group of stories. So now for something completely different, Summit. So unlike what we've got on the stage here, this is a lot of young men. Now they're very much about the cool factor, the fun factor, the founders, and what did they do? They went and bought a mountain in Utah. And the idea here is they have put together, they are gathering a collection of people. They want to shape the future. They bought this mountain. They're creating kind of an entrepreneurial meets cultural utopian community. It's again a radical experiment. At the heart of it, there's a big real estate piece to it. But it is in essence they're looking to create a utopian. So their engagements are somewhat different. They do 12 to 18 weekends per year, about 100 to 125 people. And they will occasionally do, like this year, they'll be doing an annual event. They pretty much do an annual event. It's young, it's permissive, there's lots of art and culture. The spirit, the vibe is very much about fun and generosity and openness and passion. There's kind of a Burning Man vibe. This is not the greatest of pictures, but it is. They had a dinner party that they did. It was a table that was close to a kilometer long for 800 people. And everyone forgave them all kinds of things because it's really like an art project. And that whole spirit of the community that they're developing is an art project. More of an art project, I think, than they would think of it as a media project. And lastly, I'll talk about the future of storytelling, which I think is most interesting because it's focusing on storytelling as the methodology of the moment. And so it's experimenting with all kinds of formats and immersive experiences. So it's looking at every single angle of what storytelling can be. They whisk you away in a boat from Manhattan, and they take you to Snug Harbor in Staten Island, which is another world, a world away. They're experimenting with all kinds of formats, and we've got Paula here, and different sides of groups and different levels of participation and activity and different physicality. It's a multi-threaded conference or multi-threaded gathering, so you can go into themes that are of interest to you. And they're also looking at every conceivable angle of telling a story, playing with it. And I'm ready for questions. Here we go. Bye.